Hello, everyone. Today we're talking about business style, and it's kind of an important thing to know because this is the style you'll be expected to use in the work world, whether it's in a business, corporation, or something less traditional. There are certain standards that just have developed in the world, in every job that I've ever worked in, whether it's government or nonprofit or charity. There's certain ways that you speak through email and certain ways you speak to your colleagues. And it's not at all the way that you speak to, let's say, your friend or your parents, right? So what is business style? I want to tell you that, good grammar isn't enough to produce good writing. You need a style as well, right? You probably have read something it's perfectly proper English, but it just doesn't flow. It doesn't sound right. And so we want to have a good style that's concise and understandable. And, there are several different styles. There's a style of writing where you're explaining something. There's a style where you're persuading. Perhaps you're selling something. It's maybe marketing copy. There's the type of style where you're describing something. Maybe the movie that you just saw. You're talking to your friend about what the plot line is. Or there's a style where you're entertaining. You can't be dry. You want to be funny or humorous or interesting. And style has a lot to do with the choice of words that you make, right? If you use a word like hilarious, it's going to be a totally different style than something like humorous, right? Just it's a subtle difference, but it definitely makes your writing sound different, which is, essentially style is how your writing sounds. Style depends on your technicality. If you're being very precise and using longer words, that'll suggest a more professional tone than you're using slang. Business style, what we want in business style is clarity, right? We definitely want that. But there's also a style where we're creative. In business, you might need to write marketing copy for people in the music industry. And in that case, you'd probably want to bring some creativity to that. I would say generally you want to bring creativity to your style. It's totally appropriate in business context as long as it's kept professional. If you have a poor style, if it's drab or dull or it's confusing or it's long-winded, that's going to impair your communication and it's going to reflect poorly on you. It's going to hurt your reputation. It's going to hurt your ability to communicate with people, which will hurt your chances of getting a promotion or the client. Moving on, let's look at some examples. So here's a style called narrative style. You probably see this in a lot of fiction books, right? Stories are narratives. So here's an example. In the morning, I walked down the boulevard to the Rue Soufflot for coffee and brioche. It was a fine morning. The horse chestnut trees in the Luxembourg Gardens were in bloom. It's from Hemingway. This is a narrative style. It reads like a story, right? He's telling you what he did. It's not dry technical, insert flange A into slot B of valve pump. Right? That sounds like you're talking from a user manual. It's a totally different style. You want to use the appropriate style depending on your audience, your purpose, and the context of this conversation. Then there's persuasive style. A trip to Switzerland is an excellent experience that you will never forget, offering beautiful nature, fun, and sun. Book your vacation trip today. Okay, that's maybe a little bit, it's a cliche a bit. It's a bit hackneyed. It's overused. But this is, for purposes of illustration, we know what we're saying here. It's a persuasive style, right? You're trying to sell something or convince someone to do something. And then there's a conversational tone, as if you were talking to someone on the street or over the phone. Hey, Mike, I saw you drive past me on Oxford this morning, and it jogged my memory that we need to get together for that beer. Hit me up when you have a minute to let me know when's good for you. This might be a text message or an email. It's a conversation, right? You're not being very, very formal. This would be appropriate in a situation where you're trying to have a conversation with your customer or with your colleagues or your boss, right? So that's some different examples of different narratives or different writing styles or speaking. You could speak in these ways too. So what are we going to use in this course? We're going to use what we call business style, which includes a professional tone. So your tone is not sarcastic, it's not irreverent, it's not profane, it's not using swear words. We're using standard English. Remember that there's formal, standard, and informal. We want to use the middle language. We're not going to go technical, formal. We're doing standard English because that's what people use in the business world. And go back to previous lectures if you want to review that. We usually use direct structure. Very important term in this course, going to be on all your tests, going to be used in every one of your assignments going forward. Direct structure means put the important information up front. Break it up so that it's easy to find the information. Use paragraphs, bullets, and headings. I'm going to encourage you to do that in just about every assignment that we have, because this makes your documents easier to read, which improves communication. In business style, you have to be clear. Hopefully that's obvious. You don't want to make it unclear so people can't understand what you're saying. You want to be concise, which means to the point, no extra fluff, no jargon, no corporate speak that nobody's going to understand. You want to be positive. You want to be tactful. Positive is, yes, we can help you with this issue. However, just so you know, we might not be able to get to that for another week. That's positive. Whereas, I'm sorry we can't do it this week would be negative, right? You get the point there? And tactful. Tactful just means, have tact, which means sort of be a diplomat. You want to be the opposite of abrasive. You want to be the opposite of rude. You want to be tactful. And then use plain language. We're going to get more into that, but plain language is essentially use the simplest words that you can. I know maybe in your high school English classes, you were encouraged to use complicated words and you're trying to show off your vocabulary. It's fine when you're learning, but in the real world, good writing is simple writing. Hemingway was a master at this. He was able to use the simplest word, very descriptive words. He's not using complicated, compound words that not everyone is going to understand. You want to speak to the masses, usually in business, so that everyone's going to understand. There's no confusion. And avoid contractions. Can't, won't, don't, haven't. Those things are typically not used in a professional context. And you see I've used let's up here, which means actually let us. So you shouldn't do that in a business context. Don't follow my example. All right, what is bad style? Bad style is, hey, anything that takes way too long to read. If someone is hunting for the valid information, if you're using far too many words, aka fluff. A good example of fluff is something students love is, oh gosh, I'm spacing on the particular example now, but something like, it is obvious that, you start a sentence like that? No, cut that. Cut the fluff. Just get right into what you want to say. Don't say things like in your email, hello, good morning. I hope you're well. I'm writing to you because I thought this would be a good opportunity to have a discussion. No, that's, you haven't said anything in that statement. Get right to the point. Don't be wordy. Don't make it long to read. Don't have complex sentences that are, there's multiple ideas happening at the same time in the same sentence. One idea, then the next idea, then the next idea. We also don't want our style to be ugly on the page or ugly in a verbal setting. Walls of text. I'm going to say this again and again. Don't give me a wall of text. I hate it. Everyone hates it. We don't want to see a block of text unless we're reading a novel and we're already in that mode. But in a business context, people are busy. They don't have time to see this wall of text. It scares people. They're going to put that document down. They're probably not going to read it. People want to see paragraphs, bullets, headings. They can find information easily. We don't want to confuse anybody. If someone reads what you say and they still can't understand it after reading it, that's a major problem. So if you need to give this to a classmate and have them read it, or you want to give it to me, I'll read it before the due date. I'll make sure I can understand it. If I can't, I'll tell you. And then bad style is something that doesn't fit the audience. So again, we're going back to the purpose, audience, context thing here, and specifically the audience aspect of that. We want to make sure that we're using the appropriate level of language for the audience. So if you're talking to your boss, don't talk to your boss like you would to your friend or your family member. You want to be professional. You want to be maybe less casual, depending on your boss, right? You got to know what is your boss's style. And vice versa, don't get formal with your friends, right? You wouldn't use Shakespearean language to talk to your BFF, right? So don't forget to use the appropriate style for the audience. All right, we don't want to think of style in just the way a document looks or sounds, right? That's certainly important. We want a document to look good, but bad style is actually impeding your communication. So if you have a bad style, people that don't speak the language fluently might have a lot of trouble understanding it. Or if you're using a style that's very technical and complex, people who don't have that level of education will not understand it. And this is not just an inconvenience thing. Oftentimes, these problems with style lead to great costs. Legal battles because someone didn't write the contract properly, or said something that was defamatory and they're getting sued. Medical mix-ups. If you're not clear about which arm you're operating on, you might amputate the wrong arm. Right? Happens unfortunately too often. And you don't want to alienate yourself from your coworkers, from your boss, from your family, from your partner. You want to have a style that's appropriate to the audience, so that's clear communication. That's what we're after, right? Let me give you some examples of what can go wrong here, or can go right in this case. FedEx, they saved $400,000 a year by rewriting some of their operations manuals. And the reason that happened was that they saved the people reading these manuals 80% of the time it would take to read this thing to find the information they're looking for. So you can imagine, originally the document was like a 400-page manual, and maybe they reduced that to a 20-page handout, or like some kind of reference document where it's searchable. They fixed that. They changed the style that they're delivering this information in. And they're saving a lot of employee time, right? Which saved them essentially money, save them training dollars, save them turnover, people getting hired and fired. General Electric, they rewrote their software manuals, and that caused their client calls to drop significantly, which saved about $375,000 a year per client. Now, obviously, this is a very lucrative client where they're probably paying millions of dollars for this software, right? So in this case, it was just a simple rewrite of style, and it saved them a whole ton of money. There was another U.S. government agency that rewrote one form, a public form, right? And it saved them $4.4 million per year. Honestly, I don't know how, but I can imagine it was much easier for users to fill it out. And so they didn't have to call to talk to a person. They didn't have to show up to an office to get help filling out this form. You would be amazed by how quickly these little tweaks can add up to positive change. Diving a little bit deeper into plain language here, I mentioned it earlier, but plain language is exactly what it sounds like. You want to write in the most plain style possible, generally. You do want to think about who's your audience, but in general, you want to go for the lowest common denominator. Now, that sounds a bit disappointing, but you want the person with the grade 5 education to understand what you're saying, as well as the person with the double PhD, right? Most organizations really have trouble with this. I worked in government, and they are at the absolute worst. If you have tried to navigate a government website, typically it's a nightmare. It's confusing. It's language that's been crafted. It's like Frankenstein language. It's been put together by 7 different people at different levels, and they've signed off on this, and it ends up sounding like impenetrable language, right? This problem was so bad in both the US and in Canada that they implemented what's called a plain language policy. I had to go through this training when I was in government, how to simplify language, right? How to do it as simple as possible. So the training was, they give us a very lengthy block of text, and we have to rewrite it in half or less of the words. It was great. It's a wonderful exercise. You should be doing this as well in your writing for business. Plain language is better. Simple language is better. That's a style that most people will understand. And if you want to read up on plainlanguage.gov, it's a site that will explain a little bit more about this. It's going to help you in your future assignments for the rest of this course. So please understand what is plain language. Go take a look at that site, and it's essentially required reading. So please do it. Yeah. So what are the principles? What makes up plain language principles? Well, write for your audience. Make sure you're thinking about the person that's going to read it, not you. A lot of people, they forget to use what's called the U view. We'll do more on this in another lecture, but the U view is putting yourself in the shoes of the person receiving the communication. And I want everything that you write in this course to be taking the U view. Don't forget this. It's another key principle, the U view. Make sure that you're thinking about what the user wants, right? So don't say like, we will be refunding you. No, say you will receive a refund. Simple little tweak in your language that's powerful. It'll help the reader understand what you're saying. Use direct structure, another key term for this course. want you to put all the important information up front, which means literally in the top of the document, usually, or at the very last line in a section or in a document, because that's where people will read the first and last, right? First, they'll read the first line, then they'll read the last line, usually. They'll look for the key information there in those places. Be concise, get rid of all the fluff, get rid of all the unnecessary words, the jargon. If you have industry jargon, which I'm sure you will someday, try not to use it. It's very confusing. Short sentences are better than long sentences. I don't mean you have to have 3-word sentences, but don't go into like 5 or 6 lines of a sentence. It's just too much. Design things for readability. Want to use headings. Very easy to break up information with a heading and subheading, with lists, with bullets, with short sentences, different sections, a lot of white space, which is helping to break up that wall of text. We'll do another lecture on this, but essentially this is a plain language principle. And then plain language means keeping it conversational. We don't want to write this like an IKEA manual or something. We want this to be active voice rather than passive voice. Active voice is something like, I went to the store, not the store was attended by me. That's the reverse, right? The latter is passive language. We want to be active language, which is usually verbs, right? And the present tense. Usually plain language means speaking in present tense, not he did do this. It's like he did this. A few last considerations. You can use euphemisms, but do it appropriately. A euphemism is a way of softening your language or kind of hiding your intended meaning. So a euphemism would be, senior citizen instead of old person. No one wants to be called an old person, right? Senior citizen is respectful. Old person is not. Janitor is fine. If you start to call them a sanitation engineer, now it's getting to the realm of the absurd. It's a little bit ridiculous to overstate a case. Another terrible euphemism would be during the war in Iraq. They were using the war on terror. They were using this term enhanced interrogation techniques. What they really meant was torture, right? It's not good to euphemize something like that. It just makes you look like an idiot. Be specific in business style. If you're talking about an increase, give us a specific numbers. We want to know, brass tacks, nuts and bolts. If the stock price fell, say it fell 10% instead of it decreased. And please be sensitive to your biases, to your stereotypes. We all have biases. It's impossible to eliminate them entirely, but it is possible to sort of work on it and understand it. So don't use words or language that perpetuates any kind of gender or ethnic or age bias or disability bias. We want to make sure we're being bias free in most cases. So that's it for this lecture. Take a look at the other ones and we'll talk soon. Thanks a lot.